You ready? Okay. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jai Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Mr. Pad Paramahansa Parudikacharya Ashtotar Srimad. His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnu Pad Paramahansa Parudikacharya Ashtotar Srimad. Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananda Koti Vaishnava Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai, Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. 36, I believe. You're not sure?
37 Prabhu.
I'm sorry?
37.
37. Okay, thank you. Well, it's on page 224 for everyone else except Sureshwar.
Yeah.
You got it?
Yeah.
Text 37.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yes. I didn't do Om Namo yet, did I? I did do it. Okay. Okay. On this 5th day of July, 2022, in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we're studying chapter 4, entitled Transcendental Knowledge, text number 37 at the top of page 224. Yatai Dangsi Samidhognir Basmasat Kuduterjuna Gyanagni Sarvakarmani Basmasat Kudute Tata Yataidang Sisamidhognir Basmasat Kuduterjuna Gyanagni Sarvakarmani Basmasat Kudute Tata Yataidhangsi samidhognir Basmasat Kuduterjuna Jnanagni sarvakarmani Basmasat Kudute Tata Yataidhangsi samidhognir Basmasat Kuduterjuna Jnanagni sarvakarmani Basmasat Kudute Tata. Page 224. 224. Yataidhang sisamidhognir Basmasat Kuduterjuna Jnanagni sarvakarmani Basmasat Kudute Tata. Yataidhang sisamidhognir Basmasat Kuduterjuna Jnanagni sarvakarmani Basmasat Kudute Tata. Anyone on Zoom?
Yataidhansi samidro agnir
Yataidhangsi samidhognir
Basmasat kurute arjuna
Basmasat Kuduterjuna
Jnanagni sharma karmani
Jnanagni sarvakarmani
Basmasat kurute tatha.
Basmasat Kudute Tata. Word by words. Yata, just as, a dhangsi, firewood, samidhaha, blazing, agnihi, fire, basmasat, ashes, kudute, turns, Arjuna, or Arjun. Gyan agnihi, the fire of knowledge, sarvakarmani, all reactions to material activities, basmasat, to ashes, kudute, it turns, tata, similarly. Translation. As a blazing fire turns firewood to ashes, O Arjun, so does the fire of knowledge burn to ashes all reactions to material activities. Purport. Perfect knowledge of self and superself and of their relationship is compared herein to fire. This fire not only burns up all reactions to impious activities, but also all reactions to pious activities, turning them to ashes. There are many stages of reaction. Reaction in the making, reaction fructifying, reaction already achieved, and reaction a priori. But knowledge of the constitutional position of the living entity burns everything to ashes. When one is in complete knowledge, all reactions, both a priori and a posteriori, are consumed. In the Vedas, the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad 4.4.22, it is stated, Ubhe uhai vasha ete tadat yamitaha sad vasadhuni. Sadhuni. One overcomes both the pious and the impious reactions of work. Om jnana timurandasya jnanandana salakya chakshu unmilatam mena tasmai shri gurave namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisances unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. So in this prayer that we offer before each class, we recognize that we're born in the darkest of ignorance. Even if we may get an education, college education, even a PhD, if there's no knowledge of the constitutional position of the self, the nature of God, the relationship, and how to act in that relationship, then that knowledge is actually the greatest darkness, because it keeps us bound to this material world, continuously suffering the results of our impious activities and enjoying the results of our pious activities, but that's also suffering because that keeps us tied here. So this knowledge, this gift that's given by the representatives of Krishna in the form of the parampara, we call it parampara, the line of disciplic succession. It's like a very delicate fruit that's handed down from the top of a tree, that is, so it's not damaged and it's not distorted. So this knowledge starts with Krishna. He's the original guru. Here he's speaking on the battlefield. But he also enlightened Brahma at the beginning of the universe, not by speaking, but from within the heart. Tene Brahma Hridaya Adi Kaviye. The Adi Kaviye is Brahma, the original Kavi, the original wise man. And Brahma, without the long A at the end, is the Vedic knowledge. That's the word for Vedic knowledge, Brahma. That's why it's important to get the long and short A's. Meaning is completely different. Brahma versus Brahma. So we belong to the Brahma Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya. That knowledge that Brahma received was handed down by him to Narada, who in turn passed it on to Vyasadeva, who in turn passed it on to all his disciples and wrote these Vedic literatures. So what we find in the Bhagavad Gita, what we find in the Srimad Bhagavatam, is what Vedavyas received from his spiritual master, who received it from Brahma, who received it from Krishna. So that line, that parampara, is said to be amnaya. Amnaya is the truth, or the real knowledge, that's passed down from guru to disciple. And oftentimes it comes in the form of written books, but in the early days it was just hearing, and then very clear, pellucid minds. You know what lucid means, very clear. Pellucid is extremely clear and calm. Just imagine, Sutta Goswami, when we read the Bhagavatam, we're mostly hearing his recitation to the sages at Naimisharanya. But where did he hear it from? He was there when Shukadev spoke it to Pariksit. 18,000 verses. He memorized them all as he was listening. Can you imagine how clear that is? It's like pushing a button on a cell phone so you can record it. And he was able to repeat it, and so it's come down to us as it is. And the wonderful thing about the acharyas, such as Srila Prabhupada, is that they present the knowledge in a way that we can understand it. If we, Srila Prabhupada with his analogies, first of all, in our language, that's a big thing. That is in English. And Prabhupada, so many of the words in Sanskrit, they don't really have an equivalent. Just like the most famous one is probably rasa. What is rasa? So Prabhupada's spiritual master came up with this word of mellow as a noun. You won't find that in a dictionary, But what does that actually mean? It's the feeling of attraction and bliss that comes from interacting, serving Krishna, and getting reciprocation in different varieties, different mellows. So how to present that in English? Well, you try the best you can, and you give people a method by which they can experience it directly. The difference between Gyan and Vigyan. Gyan is you hear all about how the honey was produced, which flowers it came from, what percentage it was, how much water was added, what the color is. But that's all jnana. Vijnana is you take off the top and you taste it. Oh, then you really have some. So understanding we're the soul and we're servants of Krishna, this is all essential. This is jnana, and that's what Krishna is talking about here. But if one actually acts on that basis of that jnana, okay, I'm a soul, but I'm acting as if I'm this body, and I'm staying entangled in this world, how do I really act on the soul platform, on the transcendental platform? For that, we need instruction from someone who's on that platform. It's very esoteric, transcendental knowledge. The chanting of the holy name. Who would have ever imagined that chanting this sound, there's so many millions and billions of sounds, but chanting this particular sound and understanding its significance and with concentration, that it can completely transform one's life, one's consciousness. It has a potency there. There's no scientific reason. You can't, measure the vibration. It's just, this science of bhakti, of yoga in general, is often beyond the range of our material mind and senses. But if we actually have enough faith to take part in it, we'll feel the effects. No question about it. That's why we're sitting here. So this power of the knowledge to burn, this analogy is used. Krishna uses the same analogy in the Bhagavad Gita. There's a verse very much like this. That there's different levels of the karma. There's karma. Let's just think of bad karma for now. Karma, we're going to suffer something. So it's almost like a disease, but it goes over different lifetimes. But if you contract a disease, let's use an obvious example, COVID. So right away, you may not feel anything, right? It takes a few days before you start to cough and whatever, But you've got the seed planted, and eventually it fructifies in the disease. Hopefully you can counteract it with some treatment. So karma is like that. We planted so many seeds by fruit of activities in this life and previous life. Some of them may be what we call sinful, which is contrary to the law of God, the law of nature. And so we're due to suffer for that. It's just like in this lifetime, it's not a mystery. If you eat too much, oh boy, I know I'm gonna feel sick tomorrow. I already feel a little bad. Shouldn't have done that. So there's a direct cause and effect. Oftentimes it's more subtle than that. The karma may not fructify until the next lifetime. When let's say an accident on I-5, two cars hit each other, and somebody gets injured and somebody may get killed. So it's not an accident. It's an accident, but it's not an accident that they were in the accident. You know what I'm saying? There's a reason why those two people had that. Both of them were getting their karma from some previous activity. So how to get free of this? Because this karma is staying with us from lifetime to lifetime. And it helps to keep us bound to this material world, because we have to receive the results of that karma, or it has to be eliminated by the process of bhakti. There are other ways that you can eliminate the results of the karma. This is explained nicely at the beginning of the 6th canto, chapter 1, where we're getting to the end of the 5th canto. We're going to approach it now, and there's, I think, at least there may be 2 chapters describing the hells that people who are grossly sinful suffer, and it's like very sobering. Especially, he says, I'm just giving a sample. There's like 20 different hells he describes. There's hundreds of different ones, just suitable for different categories of suffering. Illicit sex. Where isn't there illicit sex around here? In this modern age. But it's described that, if you're really, into that, then you can, for X number of thousands of years, you can be forced to embrace a molten iron form of the opposite sex, whether you're man or woman. Obviously, it's designed to kind of dissuade you from doing that, if you believe it. But these are so there are also material ways of counteracting that called priors-chitta. Priors-chitta. So worship Shiva, perform this sacrifice, ashwamedha, whatever it may be. But the problem with those means, comes up at the beginning of in the first chapter of the 6th canto, is that they don't really expunge the desire to perform the sin. That seed of desire is still there. You may say, oh boy, I really got to get rid of the results of it. But you're bound to do it again, because you haven't gotten rid of the desire for it. So how can we not only get rid of the result, but also purify the desire so we're not even tempted to engage in such an activity? That's Krishna consciousness. The whole point of this first chapter and the story of Ajamil is to illustrate the power of the holy name. There's kind of a, I don't know, get out of jail free card. You know, if you chant, but you have to chant purely. He chanted purely because he chanted inoffensively, say, not purely, but without offense, because he wasn't trying to exploit the holy name. He wasn't thinking it was some mundane practice for counteracting sin. But he was genuinely chanting with great anxiety for his son, who happened to be named Narayan. That was his saving grace, that he named his son, probably other sons, after Krishna, Krishna's name. But he himself was very sinful all his life. But because he chanted out one name of Narayan without offense, the Narayan Dutas came, the Vishnu Dutas came, the messengers of Vishnu, to stop the Yama Dutas from dragging him out of his body and taking him to hell for punishment. And the Yamadutas would say, what is this? He was so sinful. And they started enumerating all the things, you know, he married a prostitute and this and that, he was a thief and whatever. He lost it. He was a Brahmin, but he lost it due to bad association. So I think they smiled. They said, you don't know the principles of religion. So they went back to Yamaraj and asked him to explain what happened. We thought you were the judge, you were the ultimate authority. He said, no, I'm not the ultimate authority. Krishna is the ultimate authority. And then he started giving this wonderful explanation of the power of the holy name. To free us from sin, he doesn't so much describe how the real fruit of it is pure love for Krishna. But this is just a wonderful byproduct of the holy name, is that you get free from all of this good, so-called good and bad karma. So that's what's described here. But here he's talking about sacrifice. Now we know that the knowledge that comes from the sacrifice. But we know from reading these purports that the ultimate sacrifice in this age, the one really practical, is Sankirtan Yajna. So both of the goals are achieved. You're getting free from your bondage from previous life, and you're awakening your pure love for Krishna, which is a real goal. The freedom from karma, liberation, if you will, is a byproduct of bhakti. Prabhupada would often quote this verse by Bilvamangal Thakur in his Karnamrita. It says, Bhaktis tvayi sthidatada bhagavan nidhisyad daivena nak palati divya kishora murti mukti swayam mukulitanjali sevatesman dharmata kamagata yaksmaya patiksha. Is that if someone is fixed in pure devotion to you, bhaktis tvayi sthidatada means firm and steady, then eventually you'll get the fruit of that. Liberation? No. A vision of your beautiful adolescent form. In other words, the real fruit is love and attraction, and Krishna is revealing himself to you. And as far as mukti is concerned, he personifies it. She's waiting by the door with the Anjali, just like we do the Pushpanjali. Anjali is a mudra. There's so many mudras, the science of mudra. Every morning, if we're here and we see the curtain, or anytime the curtain's open, we see Radharani with this, right? This is called the Abhaya Dan. Dan is a gift. Abhaya is fearlessness. He said, basically, don't worry. Just like we would say, don't worry, everything's going to be okay. So she's always like that. You just love us, you know, serve Radha and Krishna, and everything's going to be okay. Don't worry. So that's, and then there's, you know, so many mudras, you know, mudra. If you see someone standing like this in the temple and the kirtan's going on, they're not getting the full benefit, you know. What is this? Or this, even worse is this. This is like, it's not coming in. I got my defenses up, right?
This is the most common.
Yeah, you see? This is the mudra we want. This is Lord Chaitanya's teaching. So, the glory of the holy name is that it not only gives liberation, but it burns the seed of desire that induces you to perform the sin in the first place. Then you're really protected. Just like if you get you can get a treatment for the disease, but if you get not only the treatment, but a vaccination that prevents you from getting the disease, that's even better, isn't it? So that's what Krishna consciousness is. And here he's talking about the glories of transcendental knowledge. And it's understood that if you have real knowledge, if you really understand the knowledge, in this case, you'll act on it. Otherwise, you don't understand it. If someone is trying to teach you that, you're a spirit soul, you don't have to suffer birth, old age, disease, and death. You're part and parcel of God, Krishna. Your home is in the spiritual world, and if you practice this process, you'll be able to go there and resume your ever blissful, full of knowledge life. And say, well, that's very interesting information, But it's the kind of information that, if you don't act on it, you don't really understand it. It's like we were hearing this morning about these incredible instances. There was one story where one fellow, he had a friend who was a devotee. His name was Ram Das or something, right? And they were climbing in the mountain somewhere, and there's this big waterfall that goes hundreds of feet. And he went into the water a little bit too far, and the current started dragging him, and he felt helplessly being drawn to the waterfall. And but his saving grace is that his friend was named Ram, and he was calling, Ram, save me, Ram. He's chanting the name of Rama, save me. And then he went over the falls. He lost his life. But that's an auspicious way to die, chanting the name of Ram. Anyway, we want to be. We don't want to take any chances, Just like I was remembering this Ashtaka. There's a poem about the holy name called the Kevalashtaka. It's called Kevalashtaka because the last line of each verse goes, Harinama Kevalam. For those who know, this is the last line of a famous verse. Harinama eva Kevalam. Kalo nasteva gataranyata. That this is a verse from the Brihadaranyaka Purana describing the importance of chanting the holy name in this age. Kalo, in the Kali Yuga. Harinama eva Kevalam, which means 3 times. Anything you describe 3 times, it said in the Sanskrit, it's a very important emphasis to put on it. The holy name of Hari, the holy name of Hari, the holy name of Hari alone, it will be efficacious in this age of Kali to take you to the supreme goal. There's no other way. Nastyeva gataranya. Nastyeva means na asti eva. There is no other way but the holy name. I put it in a little poem. If you want to achieve the supreme goal of life in this age, when dissension and chaos abound, there is no other way, there is no other way, there is no other way that can ever be found. But to chant Krishna's name, but to chant Krishna's name, with a stout-hearted vow, and to pray, oh Lord Krishna, O friend of the poor, let my head ever unto your lotus feet bow. I had to add that extra line because I was a line short. It's not actually in the verse, but it fits. So this whole movement is practically based on that. When Lord Chaitanya was speaking to Prakashananda Saraswati, he was a very influential and famous Mayavadi in Benares when Lord Chaitanya visited there. And Lord Chaitanya was doing what he does. He was going out and leading chanting parties and chanting in ecstasy. But he, believe it or not, he took the initiation into the Mayavadi Sampradaya, because that's all it was. There was at that time, there were no Vaishnav sannyasis. So if you wanted to renounce as a Vaishnav, you went to Vrindavan and took Babaji. Babaji is different. They just do bhajan all day. They have the white loincloth. And they don't go traveling all over the country like Lord Chaitanya did. So, but he wanted to travel and preach. So he took from this, Keshava Bharati. And he was very learned. I mean, he was Nimai Pandit. He was unparalleled. He's Krishna as a scholar. But he understood from Ishvara Puri, disciple of Madhavendra Puri, that the whole thing is in the chanting. So he would chant Hare Krishna and go into ecstasy and all these things. But the Mayavadis thought, oh, he's just a sentimentalist. He's in our group, but he's not studying Vedanta. That's what they do all day. They study Vedanta. It's pretty dry, you can imagine. So Lord Chaitanya would not have anything to do with him, but they were blaspheming him, and some of his friends, people he was staying with, were hearing that, and it was very much painful. So they said, please do something. So he accepted an invitation. So he goes to where there are thousands of disciples, and this famous Prakashananda Saraswati, So he comes in, and he takes a very humble position. He goes to the place where everyone washes their feet, And he washes his feet, and he sits down there. Usually you don't sit there because it's supposed to be unclean. But then he manifested this effulgence, because he knows that they think everyone is Narayan, and everyone is, so he manifested this effulgence that, oh, this must really be Narayan, So they were very impressed with that. And they invited him in and then they asked him, why are you dancing and chanting? Why don't you stay with us and study Vedanta? So he's telling this story, and it's kind of apocryphal, because he was a great scholar. But he says, oh, my spiritual master, Ishwar Puri, told me I'm not qualified to study Vedanta. So he just gave me this chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra. And he quoted one verse from Bhagavatam, which he said is the essence of the whole Bhagavatam. Do you know what it is? Evam vata, swapriya nama kirtya, chatanuraga duta chitta uchai, hasat chitoro tadirauti gaya chunmaravam nityati logabhaya. This describes Lord Chaitanya's activities. And one has taken a strong vow to chant the holy name, which is very dear to him. Swapriya nama kirtya. Jata anuraga, it generates anurag, so much love. Druta chitta uchai, that one's mind kind of melts in love, and one starts chanting very loudly and dancing, rolling on the ground. He describes all of these symptoms that we read about in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So he says, you've achieved this. Lord Chaitanya came back to his spiritual master after chanting and dancing, and the way he describes it, anyway, he says, I thought I had gone mad from this. I didn't know what was wrong, because every time I chanted, I would cry and I would fall on the ground and everything. So his spiritual master says, oh, thank you, my son. Congratulations, you have achieved the fruit of the teaching that I've given you. So anyway, so then they wanted him Lord Chaitanya to explain the Vedanta Sutra. He proceeded to do so from the actual point of view of bhakti. Prabhupada's name is Bhakti Vedanta. In other words, the end of all Vedic knowledge is bhakti. It's not some impersonal merging into the absolute and losing your identity. That was Shankaracharya's interpretation of the Vedanta Sutras. And it wasn't his fault. He was assigned to do that. He's an expansion of Shiva. The way Prabhupada tells it, it's a fascinating story that Buddhism had become ascendant in India because the people, because of the age of Kali, they were misusing the Vedic instructions, which sometimes prescribe certain sacrifices of animals, but in a very controlled way that actually gives the animal a new body. But they were using that as an excuse for slaughtering cows and meat eating. So Buddha came along and said, okay, ahimsa. No, but I'm not going to base it on the Vedas. So he's rejecting the authority of the Vedas for the sake of saving the cows, So Krishna told Shiva to appear as Shankara to preach a covered Buddhism through the Vedanta Sutra, to reestablish again the authority of the Vedas, but to misinterpret it in such so that because all the people who were attracted to this impersonal Buddhist philosophy would be attracted to the impersonal Mayavad philosophy. And then you have Madhvacharya, Ramanujacharya, Lord Chaitanya coming and defeating the Mayavadis and converting them back into bhaktas and showing how the Vedanta, the ultimate Vedanta commentary is Srimad Bhagavatam, which is wholly and solely about bhakti. So anyway, it was a whole strategy, the Krishna, to bring people back under the authority of the Vedas, because without that, you're lost. So the Mayavad philosophy, those who actually accept Mayavad as the truth are in trouble. They are deviated, and they can never really be secure in their so-called liberation, because it's a negative thing. We don't want to be liberated just to be free of birth and death and then have nothing to do. No, we want to be liberated in the spiritual world. And ultimately liberation is secondary, as I explained, Bhagavan Thakur says. That developing pure love for Krishna and serving Krishna includes liberation as a byproduct. But people don't know that. And so, like right here in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is describing how wonderful it is. By this knowledge, you can burn your reactions to material activities. And what's the good of that? Oh, you'll be free of the bondage of birth, old age, disease, and death. So that's an important, basic goal of human life, to get liberation. But ultimately, for devotees, that becomes secondary. We understand that that's going to happen anyway. our real motive and our real activity should be in developing or regaining our understanding, reviving our understanding of our relationship with Krishna. And then liberation will be taken care of automatically. If you just focus on liberation, you don't get the sweetness of bhakti, and you try to merge into impersonal, then it's very insecure. Aruha krichena param padam, that by great austerities, imagine trying to control the senses and the mind without the holy name, without the prasadam, without the association of devotees, without the deities, just by your own will, you know, going along to the... I'm not going to do it. And even if a few can possibly do that, it's described, the verse, Aruha krichena param padam. Aruha means to rise up to the platform of Brahman by krichena, extreme austerities of abstention and controlling the senses and the mind, and somehow getting up there. But it's not secure. Param tadam patanchidona anadvita yushmarangrya. The demigods say, but they fall down again because they're averse to serving your lotus feet. They don't believe in you, they're not humble enough, they're not in the right attitude. And so eventually they come down and do some welfare work or whatever, will become bogus yogis, whatever. It's not secure. There's no liberation. There's many verses like that, just like we read Rishabdev a few months ago, his teachings in chapter 5. Very important. So he says, in one of his verses, he says, Evam vataksva priyanam, no. He says, how's it go? Nunam pamatta kurade vikarma yadanipi parabhavastavadaboda jato yavana jigyasa atma tattvam yavat kriyastavada manovai karma yena shridamanda. Evam avidyayam. Here, this is the line. Priti niyavan mai vasudevi namuchate dehi yoga natavat. Until one attains love for me, Vasudev, he's revealing his Krishna. He's an incarnation of Krishna, Rishabdev. Until one attains love for me, Vasudev, there's no question of getting free from the bondage of a physical body. That means there's no question of liberation. Haring vinana mriting taranti. This is one of these little phrases. Without Hari, meaning devotional service to Krishna, there haring vina na mriting taranti. One cannot cross over birth and death, the land of birth and death. There's no liberation without devotional service. So that's preceded by the surrender to the Guru and understanding, getting real knowledge, transcendental knowledge, and in the course of that, the sins will be burned up automatically. But we'll be so busy trying to refine our devotional service and be sincere in rendering that devotional service to Krishna, that'll become secondary to us. It's a secondary benefit. Okay, any questions or comments? You've been taking notes too, I see, boy.
Well, I was wondering how you would answer, this came up recently in class, but it's kind of a different context. I'm wondering how you would answer if someone would ask about those hellish punishments, as mentioned in the 5th canto, and specifically you were mentioning the one about if one falls into illicit sex, then there's that's like incredibly torturous punishment, and someone could say that it does, again, the punishment doesn't fit the crime for that one. So how would you explain? You mentioned how it certainly discourages one from engaging in such illicit activities,
yeah.
But. So some would say, well, maybe it's allegory, this or that, but it seems we accept it as being literally the punishment, even for a very small accidental fall down.
Well, I think I think you have to qualify it, because if I recall, a lot of these punishments that are described, which are quite horrendous, throwing off a cliff and boiling in oil and all this stuff. Especially, they mention if a Brahmin does it. In other words, it's not as horrendous a sin for a Shudra who's in ignorance to do it. So it's almost like the difference between premeditated murder and just, manslaughter or something. The punishment is quite different. So that's an important understanding. There's still a punishment, but it's not as severe. If you do it knowingly, then that's a greater offense. And there's also the aspect, of course, this is, does it really matter if it seems to be millions of years, but it's actually not? but but it seems to be, because what is the actual interval between when you leave one body and get another? Sometimes you say, well, it's right away. Or when's the time to experience all of this punishment? And what I understand is that, because we know that time is so malleable. You have Brahma's time, his moment, which is actually a year of ours. He came back right away after stealing those calves, but a year had already passed down here. So how does that work? And it's something like what you may experience in a dream, where it seems to be a whole thing, but it's actually just a few minutes in real time. So I'd have to research, but I'm pretty sure when we're doing those chapters, this point came up, is that after all, you're out of your body, you're in your mental sphere body, and so it's kind of the thing. Well, when the gopis were dancing with Krishna, it was a night of Brahma, but time came, the sun rose too early for them. It seemed much shorter. So that's another aspect of it. But it's I think the thing that you're really looking for is that whether you were trained, it's bad, but you do it anyway, willingly, then the punishment is much worse then.
And just a follow-up, and I know this isn't the main point of this verse, but still, it's a curiosity. How would you answer someone if they asked, what's the point of so much punishment, like suffering punishment? Is it just to create fear, to keep you on the right path, or is there some other benefit for suffering, like these hellish punishments, or just bad karma? Is it just to kind of to keep you in line by fear, or how would you answer that?
Well, I think it's, you could apply that to just ordinary laws and morality in the world. Is that okay? You may have the impulse to go do this thing or take this or whatever, but there's, if your conscience doesn't stop you from doing it, you should know, you should get some pause from the punishment that's going to come. So yeah, I think a lot of it is to try to induce people to be moral and follow the shastras, so that they won't have to suffer all this punishment. So often you don't hear about that. Aren't the four birth, old age, disease, and death enough to deter you? How about the threefold miseries? All right, then if that's not enough, then how about 100 million years boiling in oil? I don't want to speculate, why these things are, but. It's interesting what the result of it is, because Jamil, his natural his compassion was awakened, and he was asking. Parikshit heard the Jamil story, and he was asking, how can they be saved? How can they be saved from all of this? And Shukadev tested him. Said, well, there are these processes of prayaschita. But then he rejected him and said, no, that's not good enough, because it doesn't destroy the seed of desire to do it. The elephant's bathing first, So then he describes how one can actually become purified of the very desire, not only get free of the results, but also the desire through the process of bhakti, especially chanting the holy name. So that's the whole idea, is that you get deterred from it, and you understand that how foolish it is to indulge in these things. There's a little bit of pleasure, fleeting pleasure, but then there's this experience of extreme pain. And I'll tell you, I've thought lately how the whole world situation is kind of showing that. If you accept the reality of anthropogenic climate change and how it's causing all of this, we already see extreme climate disasters, right? Heat waves and floods and all this stuff. And so why aren't we doing something about it? You have these marches, you have these meetings, and they have the resolutions. But then there's this whole push. Well, we created a society that requires all this energy, burning all this gas and burning all the oil and everything. And so there's really not much being done about it. because nobody realizes that it's the lifestyle itself that demands all the energy. That's the problem. To live simply and not need all of the extravagant sense gratification and everything, then you can live peacefully on the earth. But if you try to posit, well, we're going to have all this complicated and incredible, technology, and at the same time we'll live, in a way that doesn't create all this, greenhouse gases, it's too paradoxical. It's self-contradictory. So we're living in a society, an experience where we're being victimized by the results of an extravagant, artificial society that is making the earth unlivable. They're about practically destroying the Amazon, the lungs of the earth. You know that? The Amazon used to absorb so much carbon dioxide, now it's giving off carbon dioxide. It's trouble. So our duty should be to become as Krishna conscious as quickly as possible, give as many people Krishna consciousness, and don't come back. Hare Krishna. All right, let's read another verse. 38. Nahi jnanena sadrisham pavitram iha vidyate tat swayam yoga samsiddha kalenatmani vindati. In this world there is nothing so sublime and pure as transcendental knowledge. Such knowledge is the mature fruit of all mysticism, and one who has become accomplished in the practice of devotional service enjoys this knowledge within himself in due course of time. Purport. When we speak of transcendental knowledge, we do so in terms of spiritual understanding. As such, there is nothing so sublime and pure as transcendental knowledge. Ignorance is the cause of our bondage, and knowledge is the cause of our liberation. This knowledge, this knowledge is the mature fruit of devotional service, and when one is situated in transcendental knowledge, he need not search for peace elsewhere, for he enjoys peace within himself. In other words, this knowledge and peace culminate in Krishna consciousness. That is the last word in the Bhagavad Gita. Somehow I'm reminded of those verses in the 2nd chapter, 1st canto, where Sutta Goswami is answering the question from the sages of what is real dharma that can bring full satisfaction for the self. And ultimately he comes to the point, it's of course pure bhakti, and which is engendered by hearing from the right source. And he has these verses beginning with Shinvatam Sakata Krishna. When one hears from the right source and the right attitude, then Krishna within the heart, he understands that. And he cleanses away all the abhadras, the unwanted things in the heart, and you become purified. That's the whole. And that purification continues. And then there's this verse, Evam prasanna manaso bhagavad bhakti yogataha bhagavad tattva vijnana mukta sangha sajayate. So exactly he's talking about this vijnan, this realized knowledge, because knowledge has to culminate in realized knowledge. So he says one becomes naturally joyful Bhagavad Bhakti, by the process of Bhagavad Bhakti. Bhagavad Tattva Vijnanam, one understands the truth that was mentioned earlier of Brahman, Paramatma, Bhagavan, understands that fully. And naturally joyful, Prasanna Bhagavad Bhakti, Bhagavad Tattva Vijnanam, Mukta Sangha Sajayate, which includes liberation. And then the last verse in the series describes one getting a direct vision of Krishna within the heart. Vidyate vidya grantis, chidyante sarva sanshaya, chiyante jasya karmani, drishta evatmani shri. That chiyante jasya karmani means you're free of all karmic reactions. So all of the knots in the heart are cut asunder, meaning all of the material attachments. Vidyate vidya grantis, chidyante sarva sanshaya, all your doubts are eliminated because you're seeing the result. It's being revealed to you. It's not that you don't have to believe in it as something theoretical, but all your doubts are destroyed by direct experience. And then he says, all the karma is eliminated, and drishta evatmanishvare. You see the Ishvara, you see God. He reveals himself to you inside and out. And Prabhupada adds that you also see yourself. You understand your own personal relationship with God, your own Swarup. That's there. So that's all coming from bhakti, centered on hearing the pure sound. And of course hearing, when you hear enough, you really want to chant. Hearing and chanting. Those are the first two processes of bhakti. But that idea of vigyan, jnana maturing into vigyan, knowledge maturing into realized knowledge. And that's what all of this is about. There's nothing so pure as that knowledge. Kalinat manibindati, one enjoys the knowledge within himself in the course of time, and that knowledge is knowledge of Krishna. Knowledge of your relation with Krishna and living in that relationship. That's the ultimate goal. So it starts with hearing and chanting, and ultimately it ends with that, especially the holy name. All right, we have time for one more about faith. Shraddha valabhate jnanam tatpadak sangyatendriyaha jnanam labdha padang shantin achanedadi gacchati. A faithful man who is dedicated to transcendental knowledge and who subdues his senses is eligible to achieve such knowledge, and having achieved it, he quickly attains the supreme spiritual peace. Purport. Such knowledge in Krishna consciousness can be achieved by a faithful person who believes firmly in Krishna. One is called a faithful man who thinks that simply by acting in Krishna consciousness he can attain the highest perfection. This faith is attained by the discharge of devotional service and by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, which cleanses one's heart of all material dirt. Over and above this, one should control the senses. A person who is faithful to Krishna and who controls the senses can easily attain perfection in the knowledge of Krishna consciousness without delay. So just one more point. Prabhupada, there's a verse Prabhupada is referring to here at the beginning of this purport. One is called faithful man who thinks that simply by acting in Krishna consciousness he can attain it. This is the definition of faith given by Lord Chaitanya in his teaching to Sanatana Goswami. Shraddha Shabde Vishwas Kohe Sudridha Nishchoy Krishna Bhakti Korli Sarva Karma Kritahoy. The Shraddha is defined. This word Shabde in Bengali is an idiom that means it's defined. Vishwas Kohe, a firm, unshakable confidence. Vishwas Kohe Sudridha Nishchoy. Very firm faith and confidence that just by engaging in the activities of Krishna consciousness, prescribed activities, all my aspirations will be achieved. In other words, I'll achieve the ultimate goal that's possible to achieve in human life, and this will include all my hopes and aspirations that I might have. So that kind of faith is called nishtha in the ladder from Shraddha to Prema. This nishtha means firm conviction that yes, Krishna consciousness is really the goal of life, and I'm going to strive for it as hard as I can, and I have faith in the process that's been given to me by the authorized books and the authorized persons. So that's why this verse begins with the word Shraddha. That faith is an essential aspect of our devotion, and we should try to cultivate it. Rich chapter, transcendental knowledge. All right, we have time for one little poem. Okay, so here's a verse given to me by Mahavishnu Maharaj, the elder. He was a great hero. He started at Dwarka temple, the original Dwarka in India. This is from the Padma Puran. He's explained, Deheshti mangsududi devi matam chajasva jaya sutaricha sadhama matam vimuncha pushyani sham jagadidam chanapangatishtam vairagya raga rasiko bhava bhakti nishtam. Don't love the body, just a bag of flesh and blood and bone. Give up your sense of ownership for all you think you own. At every moment, see that your world totters on destruction. Become detached and learn to love the Lord without obstruction. I didn't do justice to that last line. Vairagya raga. Get attachment for detachment. Just like Raghunath Das Goswami, he was determined to give up any claim to it. Imagine, he was scheduled to be a millionaire, and all he wanted to do was escape from it and go to join Lord Chaitanya in Puri and be a mendicant, be a Goswami, having to beg for his food. That's how much he was vairagya raga. He had attachment for vairagya. But it only works if you become a rasika, if you learn how to relish Krishna consciousness, so that all of this material stuff is just so much dirt in the street. But that's, what's the advantage? Realize that this body is not our home. It's a source of misery. But it can also be used as a tool for serving Krishna, so it's great value. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Haribol.